Today we're doing Rumbledethumps, and I know that's a fun name, and that's probably why I chose it to do, simply because the word itself is so much fun. It's Scottish, but it's got really close relatives in England and Ireland, and so you may be somewhat familiar with it as a result of that. It's basically potatoes and cabbage cooked together and seasoned as you would like. Today I'm using a Savoy cabbage, and you could use a regular green-headed cabbage, and you can see the difference here. This is the Savoy, and it's they're very similar in flavor. The Savoy is usually a little bit more expensive, but again, it's very mild flavor, very similar to green cabbage. Whichever one you can get is going to work fine. What I have in the pot currently working is about 1 pound of potatoes. I'm using russet potatoes because I want to mash them, and I don't want them turning into glue. And I'm using just about 1 inch of water in there, and we'll let them boil until they're tender enough to mash with a potato masher and then move forward. Now what I have here is 4 tablespoons of butter. Again, you could use margarine if you would choose to. You're going to let that melt pretty much all the way. I think that's probably melted enough for us to move forward with it here. And we're going to put the cabbage, which has been finely shredded. There's 12 ounces of cabbage, 1 pound of potatoes. This is going to go in with the butter, if I can get most of it in there and not elsewhere on the stove. That's going to go in there, and we're going to want it to cook until it's becoming tender. But we don't want it to brown. But I'm also going to add to it about 1 cup of onion that's been sliced fairly thinly. And again, we're just going to cook this. This may take 4 or 5 minutes. You want it to stay relatively hot by the time the potatoes are done, because we're going to stir everything together and we're going to add some cheese to it, and we want the cheese to be melted before we go to the next step. So again, turning it every couple of minutes. Don't let it brown, but we do want it to wilt. Once the potatoes are tender, go ahead and mash them. Now, if you decide that they're a little bit too dry, one of the things I like to do is add just a little bit of milk. But I tend to like my mashed potatoes a little bit looser than some people, so use your discretion on that. You could also wait until you have the other ingredients added to the recipe and add it at that time. I think that's probably decent. All right, we have this done and ready to go. So I'm going to add about 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt to our skillet, and the same amount of pepper, so 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. And these are both optional, or you could do more on them if you wanted to. I'm going to stir them together before I add some of the other ingredients, because I want to make sure that I get the salt and the pepper blended in as well as possible, as opposed to what often happens with me, with one person getting all of the salt or all of the pepper. And then take those potatoes that you've now mashed and make them as smooth as you would like. I tend to like them a little bit chunky, but I think traditionally they would be more pureed or more finely pureed than what I've probably done here. And then to that I'm going to add about 1/4 cup of shredded cheese. Now, cheddar cheese would be the kind that would be most often used, but you have up to you what kind you want to use. I'm using a white. I'm using a Jack, actually, because I wanted something white as opposed to the orange color that most of our cheddar has added to it. And we're just going to stir this together until the cheese melts, pretty much. And don't worry if it's not completely melted, because there's another step to this. We're going to put it in the oven for a little while. So we just mix them together fairly well. And then I have a casserole dish, somewhere between 1 1/2 to 2 quarts. And we're going to transfer this into that, and then we're going to sprinkle another bit of cheese on top of that and cover it, put it in the oven at 400 degrees, preheated, for 30 minutes. And then we're going to take the lid off. 20 to 30 minutes will do. It kind of depends on how yours works and how quickly it heats up. Then we're going to take the lid off it and let it continue to cook for another 10 to 15 minutes until it gets a little bit brown and it gets nice and bubbly and is making lots of noise. That last bit, this is another 1/4 cup of cheese is going on top. Kind of spread it around. You can flatten that out a little bit. I kind of like how if it's sticking up, it tends to get a little bit more browner in places. And I like that, so I'm going to leave it a little bit peaked. Okay, this was in for 20 minutes and then 15 minutes with the lid off, and you can see it's gotten a little bit brown and toasty. And if you could hear it, you can hear that it's kind of sizzling because the oils from the cheese and the butter and so on and the liquid in the potatoes are kind of making noise here, and it just sounds like something that you want to eat as well as looks like something you want to eat. This is really good. It's something different. If you've had cold cannon or something like that, it's real similar. You can change it up, add some garlic to it or some other things like that. Play along with it. You're going to have a good time eating it as well. I hope you'll give it a try. It's Rumbledethumps from Oklahoma Gardening. I'm Barbara Brown.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.